this works. I think it should. The holotape should get there safely. I hope. Mission report 397, GHJ 321. Night Sergeant Mikhail Gorlowski reporting. The depth of the Protectorate's involvement in fostering our instability goes farther than we ever could have envisioned. The records I have discovered and the things that I have seen are an immediate and present danger to the Brotherhood and to the entire Midwest. The Protectorate's evil goes back all the way before the war. Pre-war America was slipping into paranoia and antisocial disorders. Due to the middle and lower classes stockpiling weaponry, the upper classes began to fear an armed uprising. We are already well aware of how the Vault program had nefarious motivations, but Vault Tech did have people that were profiting from its projects, and those people needed a place for them to ride out the coming apocalypse, and they certainly were not going to do it in a hole in the ground. The location these white-collar criminals chose was Chicago, and the project they thought would see them through the end times, they called the Ark. In addition to being a biblical reference, Ark is an abbreviation for arcology. An arcology is a self-contained ecological, social, and commercial system. The arcologies of Chicago were built and finished the year before the hostilities began, and they were presented to the public as novel residence centers for the rich and well-to-do to retire in, rather than reveal their true purpose. Other arcologies were presented as test facilities for interstellar exploration or novel mechanical wonders. In truth, these facilities had everything the rich and powerful would need to survive the war, and only the rich and powerful. With planned communities and planned population, there was no room for their lessers. These arcologies were designed to have self-supporting power, food, water, and manufacturing services. They would need nothing from the outside world. 5 arcologies were completed before the war. These centers were massive and could house up to 30,000 people each with ease. They attained this high degree of concentrated population by using advanced robots to serve their human masters and AIs to fill the gaps that might be needed. They would never ever again, the residents that is, have to trust on lesser human beings. At least, that was the plan. Xanadu was the first Ark that was completed, and it was promoted as a proof of concept design to the public. With what was considered futuristic and sleek architecture, television crews would often go amongst its hallways and show to the world the wonders that were coming in the dawning age of atomic power. The living units were all planned along corridors that had multiple elevators and stairwells to ease travel. One need never own a vehicle. Corridors were relatively wide, so there'd never be any jams. 50 to 60 feet of corridor makes excellent places for crowds of people to travel without bumping into one another. The next Ark was called Babylon, and it was built with an ancient Mediterranean and Persian motif in place. Many places inside this Ark had been perfectly manicured into parks, where the flight of genetically altered birds could be seen, as well as listening to their trilling songs to ease stress. Light filled its hallways as sunlight was redirected. Plants were genetically modified to produce even more oxygen and to thrive in the enclosed environment. The third Ark was called Nouveau Paris, and it was fashioned with a more modern look to its architecture, but also with smaller living units, so there would be more commercial entertainment sections. Built as a pan-cultural megastructure, the Nouveau Paris hosted an AI that was extremely powerful. This AI would monitor all conversations, and via an earpiece instantly translate all the languages spoken to the user. Also, by means of a special pair of viewing goggles, the AI could superimpose messages about cultural facts or like products and artists to the viewer's experience. This augmented reality quickly became the wave of the future. The fourth Ark was called Tenacity, an Ark built as an example of what preparing starships and colonies for interstellar travel and settlement might look like. Tenacity had very Spartan living centers, and the bulk of the Ark was built with concerns for production and storage. Tenacity was marketed to middle-class families that might be more prone to work the soil, and to some venture capitalists that were toying with the idea of colonizing the asteroid belt. The elites felt they would need some form of workforce, and this one might delude itself into thinking it was actually making a profit. The last Ark, the central one of the complex, was called Byzantium. Byzantium was 3 times the size of the other Arks, and estimates brag they could easily house 1 million people. This Ark had a great deal of its construction in subterranean power centers, and it was positioned to aid the other Arks in powering the device that would help them survive the coming war. This device was called the Aegis Magna. It was a project that no reputable organization or company would thoroughly back before the war. It was an attempt to create a force field with holographic displays on the field so the field would be visible to the naked human eye. The field had been marketed to the military, but had proven ineffective against any ballistic system. However, unknown to the military, it had proven extremely effective against preventing radiation from crossing its area of deployment. The surface of the hollow field could display various colors and images if properly projected. When radiation storms flare up on the plains today, one can see the hollow fields ripple in rainbow colors as they harmlessly deflect and dissipate the harmful radiation. In 2077, when the bombs dropped, the arcs had only been half occupied. This proved to be an even greater benefit to the residents, as it meant the first 3 years of confusion largely passed without them having any resource concerns. The hollow fields proved not only adept at deflecting radiation, but also protecting the advanced electronics inside the arcs from electromagnetic pulses. Civilization had been saved, at least as far as the elites were concerned. Yet as the outside world attempted entry, the population inside the arcs realized that they were woefully unprepared for violence. The security robots that many of the facilities relied upon would, with time, be lost to attrition and mechanical malfunctions. The first ghoul plague of 2078 to 2079 made the Archons very reluctant to venture outside the arcologies or the nearby areas that they needed to dominate for aid or supplies, and they certainly were not going to let any strangers into their communities. Late in 2079, Chairman Regina Jaspers convinced the chairman of the other arcs to unite and combine their various resources. The goal was to protect their citizens and to connect the arcs in a workable system of travel and security so they could share resources. Using robots, the Archons began building fortifications and walled passages towards one another, but the attrition of monsters and raiders aided their forces, slowing this effort. Jaspers realized that what was needed was more manpower. The elite desperately needed someone to direct. She issued Arc Command Number 734 in late 2079, which commanded all the female Archons to donate 3/4 of their egg cells to the Arc medical team. Using the same technology that had been used to clone the plants and the animals of their arcologies, Jaspers created human clones to do the work of the arcology. Original Archons and their descendants are now referred to as alphas, and the clones of these first were referred to as betas. The betas had amongst them clones that had not exited the process well, with any great intelligence, but with greater physical endurance, and these were in turn called omegas. Thus began the genetic caste structure that the Archons have maintained ever since. Using omegas to aid in the building and betas to be their infantry, the Alpha Archons managed to connect all the arcs into a cross-like section of highways. These were defended by walls and automated turrets. Slowly they began taking and reworking territory around these highways. By a combination of mutated plants and robotic workers, they began completely changing the cityscape of Chicago into fertile farmland. By 2081, they would have built and completed a barrier wall around their settlements that allowed a protected wilderness to grow inside of them. Over this, they could extend the hollow fields to block out harmful radiation. They allowed no one inside during those first years. Observers were then sent out into the wilderness to scout and report back to the Archons upon conditions. It is believed that what few functioning war satellites remained were also under the control or could be hacked into by the communications arrays on top of the Ark's roofs. By mid-2081, the Archons realized that there was no going back to the pre-war world. A new government was installed amongst them. This government, called the Chairman, was to consist of one chairman from each arc. Votes would be by majority. Each chairman in turn was elected by a simple popular vote from amongst their citizens of their own arc. I cannot confirm when it was the Archons decided to engage in the genetic manipulation of their society, but it seems that reasoning behind such action was that only humans genetically engineered to accept their roles in society would be able to coexist in such cramped conditions, as humans have a natural tendency to compete. The Archons established many different lines of genetic modification, all of which influenced cooperation and contentment in the assigned role of the genetic predisposition. But the typically overly scientific and regulated Archons did not well anticipate the future of what exact genetic lines and roles for their society they would fully need. Typically, any genetic divergence or strains of alterations takes place within a broader scope of shared traits that have been tailored for a role, and these have been given names from the Greek alphabet. At the bottom of this genetic pyramid are the aforementioned omegas. Bred for service and physical might, the omegas are docile and non-combative to their superiors. I have seen them accept severe beatings without complaint by their overlords, and be content to eat their simple gruel and sleep in heavily overpopulated barracks. The epsilon line of the genetic modification series is the average citizen of the arcs, and the one that works at a normal job, that is overseeing robotic workers or omegas in the field. Epsilon lines, like all the lines of the Archons, are highly disease resistant. and the effects of aging are greatly delayed. An Epsilon-modified human is likely to show no signs of aging until their late 70s. The average lifespan of this modification is roughly 90 years. The average Epsilon intelligence quotient is also much greater than those born outside the arcs. The gamma line of modification is also found to be in the average citizen tier. It reflects lines of genetic modification that cause the body to better accept cybernetic enhancement. The gamma line does not have the epsilon line's improved intelligence, but typically in the arcs, this line of genetically modified humans, the gammas, are modified as a heavy workforce supervisor and compose the military emergency service professionals. It is also from this line that many of the rebellious members of the society come from. This has led to talk of the line being phased out by the chairman, but many of the chairmen still see a need for this line in colonizing the wilderness. The delta line of modification is modified for superior health and beauty. These expressive and charismatic modified archons serve as entertainers and providers of physical love. Delta modifications are also predisposed to want to please others. The modification reminds me of the kept women and kept men of pre-war society, or of some kind of geisha combined with a gigolo or prostitute. The beta line of modification has been modified now for greater grace, power, and athleticism. They compose the leadership positions in the Archon's military structure and in the Protectorate in general. The Protectorate uses them as its special forces exclusively. Betas have become more and more warlike as the modification has been refined. They are almost all stoic, silent, and very suspicious of any non-Archon. The Alpha line of modification combines many of the below traits. They have greater intelligence, physical grace and power, charisma and beauty, a greatly extended lifespan, and are almost immune to disease. Their lifespan is easily able to let them reach 200 years of age, and they might even be able, with cybernetic enhancement, to regenerate their bodies fully or transfer their consciousness to another cloned or cybernetic body. They are haughty, egotistical, and every single one of them I have met or experienced is xenophobic. I also do not believe them to be entirely sane, as they are prone to manipulate the lower genetic castes and each other in games of politics and violence that to me imply megalomania. Most of these times this manipulation is done solely for their amusement. The chairman had a polity that they refer to as the protectorate. The symbol for the protectorate is that of a white flag with an outlined black representation of a transistor circuit. Inside protectorate walls, there is little that a pre-war or post-war man or woman would recognize. Mutated animals and flora bloom, and thrice alongside the genetically and cybernetically modified humans that reside there. Since at least 2090, this has been the norm. It seems to be a product of the Protectorate having met its northern neighbor, the Lansing Republic, in 2089 and establishing a border. This has made the Archons become insular and turn their attention largely inward, or at least not towards northern expansion. Untrusting of outside medical technology, the cybernetics of the Protectorate began as a prosthetic for the wounded, but as their technology improved, soon it was not uncommon to see body mod shops appear inside the arcs. Today, a Protectorate citizen with enough dinars, the Protectorate currency, can walk into a body mod shop and order a cybernetic enhancement. Most Archons that have a cybernetic enhancement have one that allows them to access the wireless and holographic computer augmented reality of the arcs. All Archons have a locator beacon installed to them, so the Protectorate can locate them in a moment's notice. This has greatly reduced crimes inside the arcs, and so political division, since the meetings of persons or communications can be easily monitored, is almost unknown. Many Archons will not only modify themselves with non-apparent cybernetics, but also with other advantages that aesthetically are pleasing, such as this season's hair or that season's eye color. However, a movement of punks, referred to as 10 men or tenors, does exist in their society, and I would guess that as many as 1 in 4 of the Archons that currently live have some severe modification, such as a fully replaced cybernetic limb or even full body conversions. In 2090, the Brotherhood first contacted some of these fully converted humans, that is to say, human brains inside robotic bodies. Neo-humans, as they refer to themselves. They were mistaken for an unknown version of the Robco robo-brain, and they were fired upon. In retrospect, that is a great missed opportunity for the Brotherhood, particularly to infiltrate and improve its own technology, and helped cement the Archon's fear of any outside contact. A short military action followed with mixed results. The Brotherhood failed to take any territory and gain access to the neo-human technology, but the Archons could not well adjust to the losses they had suffered. The battlefield losses also impressed upon the chairman the need for trade with outside sources. In the summer of 2090, A truce between the Brotherhood and the Protectorate was established. The Brotherhood would be allowed to attach advisors to Protectorate foraging and developmental parties. In return, the Protectorate would help supply the Brotherhood with arms, fuel, and allow them bases from which to operate. All this is the product of a philosophy going back to Jasper, who said, "For far too long, humanity has advanced by means of an unguided and faulty process of evolution. We have been neglected by God, who has seen fit to let us advance purely in response to outside stimuli. What humanity needs is a directed evolutionary process towards that of a neo-human existence, and we shall be that director and that protector." It is my conclusion that we, the Brotherhood, were taken advantage of by the Protectorate, and that for the past 2 centuries they have been manipulating us and using us to further their own territorial expansion. Originally, Brotherhood vertibirds and knights were aided by the Protectorate in ferrying materials to outposts in the wasteland. Now we seem to do it for them almost exclusively. We help them build the defenses that are referred to today as the triple walls. Yes, I am fully aware that our own ability to fix radiation sickness and resist its effects are due to the Protectorate medical science, but what else have we gained? Every base that we have built for our own use was eventually taken over and became that of the Protectorate. By 2165, the Protectorate began opening up these conquered areas to humans fleeing from the wasteland, so long as they accepted Protectorate rule. From time to time, the Protectorate still opens its gates for a limited time to outsiders. These citizens never become archons and are referred to as unmods, for unmodified human. The Protectorate does not accept the diseased or the mutated. It does impose some draconian measures upon the unmods, but there is a court system, and though they do not have the vote, the Protectorate does not ignore the concerns of the unmods either. The Brotherhood thought that this was a tactic simply for the Protectorate to rebuild its population. God, we were so wrong. For I have seen in the labyrinth of tunnels below Byzantium that the Protectorate is creating. They are creating an army. The people they let in report that after an extensive medical examination, the women often have their eggs collected and the men have their sperm sampled. I have seen where those processes end up. They are in turn processed in the underground laboratories beneath Byzantium and turned into clones. But not the clones of archons. No. These unmods, who are hypotaught skills, and their bodies are then forced and grown into adulthood in those vats. They are provided with weaponry and arms, and then transported asleep into the wastes to awaken as raiders. Yes, the reason we have never been able to defeat the raider tribes, the reason why they always seem to have been able to find more to fill their numbers when we've decimated them in battles, is that the eggs of the refugee unmods are being transformed into a barbaric horde and let loose upon the world to keep things unstable. By doing so, the Protectorate keeps the other polities busy as it spends its time building up new power sources, for power sources seem to be the only resource that they seem to be lacking in, and their lifestyle consumes a lot of power. The laboratories also hold banks full of genetic horrors, things that make a Deathclaw look caring and docile by comparison. One can only assume that in addition to these monsters, they have vats full of diseases on store that the Archons themselves are immune to, and that would explain many of the outbreaks of the measles and choleras that have swept the land. Further, I believe the entire reason the Protectorate agreed to participating in the Forefather War was to weaken the Brotherhood. We lost a great deal of men, material, and esteem in that conflict. I believe it to have been a deliberate deliberation on part of the chairman to weaken us. Since the war, our operations have become ever more dependent on Protectorate supplies, and many of our missions have directly benefited them. And this should not be surprising, since Archon's character has been corrupted by their society. The average Archon is far more concerned with his wealth, station, and the gradual domination of the outside world than they are anything such as morality or ethics. They are hedonistic and materialistic to the core. Corruption allows them to engage in conspiracies against one another, yet never endanger the well-established families or chairmen because of their superior surveillance technology. They have already dominated a class of themselves, the Omegas, and regulated them to slave labor, and treat the unmods as some kind of prison camp, and with great disdain. Should we be that surprised that a society that is willing to bombard the unmods daily with hypno-suggestive advertising beams is not one that is trustworthy? Further, I believe the Protectorate can clone specific persons. These imitation clones are as much a threat as the synths were in the Boston Theater. I believe they may have even cloned and replaced several of the rival polities, militaries, and governmental personnel. I could swear that I saw a clone of a Lansing general and a Quebecois royal in those vats. And I have also seen the cloned faces of former friends and sergeants that I have worked with in the Brotherhood. It is my recommendation that the Brotherhood launch an immediate attack before it is too late. Wait, what was